see if they can represent us properly and if they got the proper smarts to do the job, instead of being on self-agenda program. That's about all. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Mayor, Council, good evening. My name is Romark, and I live in one of the affected properties on the waterfront in Selmont Point. Can you hear me all right? How's that? I'm not as affected as most people, but I think a lot of the other people here tonight did my talking for me. I'm really here to represent those people that are worst affected by this. When I did the improvements on my property, I think I dodged a bullet from everything I'm hearing. I put up a new house and put up landscaping over top of old landscaping, so really there was nothing that material that was adversely affected. I do see. I think the intent of this bylaw was well intended. I'm hearing that the implementation was perhaps not so well handled. I think it was done legally. I think it was done cleverly. I think it was sneaky, but I also think it was ham-fisted and was not well considered. I do see a booming business for environmental consultants and biologists going forward. When I considered all of this, I've had to stand back from it. I haven't given it a great deal of research, but I had to ask myself if it was, if this was reasonable, and the second question was who pays for it? Is it affordable? So under the question of being reasonable, when I stand back and look at it from the waterfront perspective, it seems to me that that the municipality has appropriated at least 50% of the most valuable part of people's property to designate as a natural park, that the landowner has to pay to maintain and has to pay the highest taxes in the municipality for that privilege. In terms of who pays, again, I was largely unaffected, and I think when I look at the aerial surveys, a lot of the property has been pretty well developed. And I think the people that are left, a lot of the people that have been speaking here, the people that have been there for decades, they're in little cottages, it was their little nest egg, and when they finally sell, they'll try to recoup the best that they can. Those are the people, and this is the unintended consequence of this bylaw, that are the most adversely affected by this. They're the ones that bear the biggest burden out of all of this. So, like I said, I think that by and large everybody supports the notion, supports environmental stewardship. I just think it has to be done in a more clever way. Thanks very much.
Tracking this, number 27. And do feel free if you want to populate the chairs that allow you to just come up and keep this rolling, because as much as you can hear tonight, the better. But there will likely be a follow-up.
Mr. Mayor and Council, good evening. My name is Miko Ikonen. I live at Whittier Avenue here in Saanich. I'm a realtor with Sutton Group, 21 years in the business. And over the last 2 years, I have worked with a lot of clients who were affected by the EDPA. And I have been personally in the front row seat to see the impact. Just last week, the most recent example, showing a property at Darcy Lane, oceanfront property. I had my client on an email service searching for this type of property, and they contacted me and said, well, we've been waiting for something just like that to come along. Could you please come over and we'll discuss it? I'm familiar with developers and developments and being involved from the ground up, putting a lot of those together. So I was aware of the EDPA. I got on the GIS maps, pulled up the EDPA, the property in question. 1108 Darcy Lane, Cordova Bay waterfront, and noticed that approximately 50% of the property is in EDPA. Printed off a copy, and went to see my clients. I was also aware that there is a pending bylaw to do with invasive species and the obligations that that would eventually bring about on the homeowner. I advised my clients accordingly, and I'll just read the letter they wrote. Now, this is Nolan Peters and Sandra Gillen. They live in Saanich, 4584 Quailwood Close. Entitled, Our Story. We're about to purchase a nice, big Darcy Lane waterfront property when it came up in the market last week. We called our real estate agent the day of the property was listed. We had been eyeing that property for years, hoping it would come back on the market, but we were told by a realtor about the EDPA line across the property. The percentage of land left illegally built upon after applying the EDPA rules was so small that we changed our minds and won't be making an offer. Now, this property was listed for $1.369 million. A significant portion of the area covered by the EDPA at Darcy Lane property was trimmed grass. I took some photocopies of the ortho photos going back a number of years, and it was very evident that a great portion of the property in EDPA had no trees and was simply trimmed grass. Clearly, the area had previously been someone's lawn and garden. There were no native plants there, just invasive Himalayan blackberry. The letter goes on to say, I feel very sorry for the couple from Alberta who bought the property several years ago, and we're now putting it back on the market. I suspect they couldn't be at the town hall meeting to be heard today. Our story and theirs is a very tangible recent example of property being seriously devalued. They felt that they would not be making an offer on this property at all because it is of no value to them. They would have paid the asking price. Now they'll offer nothing. She goes on to say, I consider myself a strong environmentalist. I voted for the Green Party, but the EDPA is arbitrary and unfair. The area covered from the shoreline up is too large, generally speaking. Moreover, each property should be inspected individually at the owner's request with the view to determine the fair line. Got a 36 seconds here. I'll just mention that from a real estate perspective, most realtors were not even aware when they were selling these properties in the last few years, and still are not aware of the full impact of this. I suspect neither are the lenders, and once they become aware, that's when it's going to get really interesting. Thank you.
Don't start the timer yet. We're going to take a break in about 10 minutes. And I just want to encourage those of you who still want to speak and have not signed up, you will have a chance over the brief break to sign up to do that. So I want to encourage anybody who's still waiting that you'll have a chance to do that. So we'll turn it over to number 28, I think.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Hello, my name is Valerie Lindholm. I'm a resident of Saanich. I have a property that's called High Bank Waterfront over the gorge. I love my property. I've done everything that I can to encourage what will grow there, which is natives, and I'm a proud member of the Saanich program for oh, that's completely gone out of my head, but you know, it's to salvage plants. Haven't heard from them for a while, but that was a great initiative. I really liked it. And also at the same time, I noticed that in the gorge in front of my property, there was a bunch of garbage, very heavy garbage to move. It's amazing how heavy tires can be. There is a big corrugated pipe there with a piece sticking up like this. I had been in contact with the Saanich at the time, various departments by email, photograph, phone call. Imagine my surprise one day when I came home a little early, I happened to look out my window, there were some men standing there that I'd never seen before. I went out there and said, oh, excuse me, but who are you? Oh, they were from Saanich Planning. This was their idea of inclusiveness to me on my property. I felt threatened that they were there. They also came at the wrong time, because this thing that sticks out of the corrugated metal pipe that is dangerous to anybody who is swimming, kayaking, animals, birds, whatever, that because it's very close to shore when the tide is low. They were there in the afternoon, the thing was covered, they didn't even see it. So that was not useful. What I did was I went in and I would and will do now with the CPDA object to my taxes, because as I went in there and spoke to them, I said, I'm being charged on waterfront like it's special. Come to my place, it's a dump. So I think there's a lot of people that we try to organize in the gorge. We have various little organizations that try to clean up, but sometimes you cannot lift these things. You need a winch of some kind. So around the corner from me is a beautiful property that is partly where the Admiral's Road most recent bridge extension went. It's a beautiful piece of concrete. There's a lot of concrete there, and it is in an environmentally sensitive area, and if that was a residence, that bridge would not be there. I've been traveled in Europe, many places in the United States, and I have seen sidewalks and roads go around important trees. If anyone goes to the Craigflower Schoolhouse there, you will see a beautiful big, I don't know if it's a sequoia or what kind of coniferous tree it is, but the bridge, you can barely get your hand in between this tree and the bridge. So that tree's growth has been stopped by the bridge. And that's too bad, but that's just the way it is. But I think that if my taxes would continue to increase, that I would go and dispute them if this bylaw were to continue. So I think we're all about private property. Most of us try to respect our private property. If somebody has a waterfront and they want to put a dock in, it's very hard to say no, although I do support the gorge being gasoline-powered boat free, and to have that as a bird and animal sanctuary. I think that Saanich has done good things by putting those frisbee-like objects on the high power cords so that water birds can take off and be fine. And I love Saanich. And I'm sorry that this has come to where it's gone, but I think that we can do better and recreate a type of bylaw that protects the environment and the people who are the stewards of our environment, because we care about where we live. Thank you.
Number 29. My name is Carol Davidson. I recently chose to move back to Saanich. I actually started in Deep Cove 74 years ago, so I have all sorts of history. Had a horse here, kept that in central Saanich. I know all the old farming families. I've been a very successful farmer. I've also been, even though I'm a woman, a very successful project manager and looking after construction and site servicing. And I recently bought 7.6 acres in Saanich. I was quite excited. And on the strength of the fact that there were covenants and development permits on it, I've taken myself off to the University of Victoria, and I'm currently enrolled there as a student in the Environmental Studies Department. So I'm working on it. My property has a covenant, 3 development permits, and everything between everything else, I end up with 93% of the property in control of Saanich. Of the half acre that's left to me, there are 8 designated trees on it, which I have managed to avoid damaging and have kept, even though I'm putting up a house and a driveway, because it was bare land when I bought it. So I actually have about 4% of the property that I can actually do something on without somebody in Saanich telling me I can or can't and putting conditions on it. I think that's pretty stiff. What makes it worse is that before I bought the property, because of my background, I did what I thought was due diligence. I called up, I talked to engineering, I talked to planning, I talked to environmental services. Now that was an interesting conversation. I phoned up and said, hi, my name's Carol Davidson, and I'm thinking of moving back to Saanich, and I'm looking at this property on West Saanich Road, and I'd like to know if there's anything I need to know about it. And the person's response was, in a very cold, sarcastic, arrogant tone of voice, and I'm really good at those, said to me, we're not changing the covenant boundaries. And I went, oh, okay. I mean, this is before he'd ever even talked to me and found out how offensive I am, and he was being rude to me. So my relationship with Saanich over the next 2 years has gone steadily downhill. And it sort of culminated the other day when I've now spent $13,000. I'm 74, I'm just retired, I don't have a lot of cash. I've sold a 40-acre farm where I was a very successful farmer. I'm moving back down here. I've got rural agricultural property. I plan on continuing to farm in a small manner. And I ran into all these development permit issues, and I hired a biologist before I ever even offered for the property. And the biologist said to me, yeah, you're right. None of these boundaries make sense. If you go ahead and buy the property, I'll come and do a survey for you, and we can get Saanich to change it and correct it so it actually matches where the riparian areas are. And I thought, hey, this is good. So this is what I did. I bought the property, and I spent my $13,000 on all my biological, ecological, environmental surveys, and on the surveyor who had to come and mark all the pinpoints. And one of the portions had a streamside development permit on it that turns out to have been incorrectly placed. Is that a polite way of saying it? It didn't qualify for streamside development permit. It should never have been applied. I'm of the opinion that the EDPA is actually not bad. Don't lynch me, guys. But what I have found is that the Saanich staff have chosen to interpret and apply at their discretion how it's going to be used. And I've actually gone from a streamside development permit to an environmental development permit, which covers exactly the same area, even though I've paid my money for a biologist to come and say, instead of being 3/4 of an acre that's in this development permit area, it should only be an area about 8 feet by 40. And the excuse was, reason, I'm so sorry. The manager of environmental services was not able to make the line any thinner on the map. Ladies and gentlemen, it's out of control. You need to do something about it.
Given the time, I think we'll have one more speaker before we take a short break, and then we'll reconvene just a little after 9, but we'll be precise about that. So our final speaker before break.
Good evening, Mayor Atwell, councillors and residents. My name is Margaret Backman and I live at 3720 Ascot Drive. And I'm speaking for the philosophy of the EDPA, but I do hear very much the people here that are very concerned, and I'm greatly concerned with them. I think it is important to step back and we look at this bylaw in greater depth, and it may need to be totally reworked, and that's okay with me. To work with residents and stakeholders to fully understand their concerns, meaningful communication and compromise is important. Personally, I can speak to you. I live at 3720 Ascot Drive, which is 3 doors down from the Cedar Hill Golf Course. I want my property to have been included in the EDPA, and I and many of my neighbors thought that we were in the environmental sensitive area. And the rationale for that was way back in 1993. We had a very challenging time with potential redevelopment. We spent a lot of our time at council. We went to the Supreme Court. There was illegal tree cutting. We went to approving officers hearing, which in the end supported the sensitive area and the ecosystem. And I was assured at that time from the environmental planner at that time that our area was in the environmental sensitive area. Imagine to my surprise that we aren't. And I talked to the environmental planner about that, and she was going to look into that. But here we have a neighborhood that we truly believe is environmental sensitive. It's a wildlife corridor. It's near Kings Pond. It's near Jenkins Pond. It's got wetlands. It's at the Colquitts River. And Saanich even purchased 3 lots last year to add and protect this valuable area. My neighbors who couldn't be here tonight said I could speak on their behalf. Jim Moores and Ann Bowen of 3735 Ascot Drive. Their property is part of the valuable wetlands in Colquitts River, and they do a lot of work. Jim does a lot of the wood duck boxes, and he's done lots of invasive plant species removal. And they asked to be in the EDPA, and they got a lukewarm response. My neighbor who owns Jenkins Pond, of which Saanich wanted to purchase a number of years ago, went to inquire because he wanted to be on the EDPA, and he was told to have a biologist or perhaps a well-known botanist, Nancy Turner, who lives in our area, and graduate students to help assess his property. Now, Nancy Turner has lived in our area for years, and she actually helped us plant the native plants at the berm, of which my neighborhood went out and keep watered, and we plant, and we rolled the leaky boat out there, and we removed the leaf stripe to try to keep Kings Pond alive. And I wouldn't be so concerned, except I'm afraid to throw anything at my house, because in 1992, I have all the studies from Karen Golinsky from 1992, which talks about the importance of Jenkins Pond and Kings Pond. So why doesn't the environmental department know about this? So, I mean, my concern is we have an area that looks like it is environmentally sensitive. We've been told it is. Saanich purchased 3 properties, and we can't even get on it. And I was assured we were on it. And had I think about it, I'll phone the previous environmental planner and get it notarized that we should be. It says in Karen Golinsky's report, and it was a graduate study done, that Jenkins Pond and Kings Pond are integral to the sensitive area. It needs to be enhanced. So I am saying that I believe if this bylaw is reworked, we'll be first and foremost to work on a roundtable report on all of this. We'll be glad to do it. But I can't, I wouldn't feel right that our neighborhood gets what we want at the expense of all the other people that are hurting. It wouldn't make us feel well at all. I do think after hearing everybody, I think it's grassroots. You've got to go down and you've got to hoof these people's properties. You've got to sit down for coffee. You've got to talk to the people. You've got to talk about the history. I've got binders at home. I've got photo albums. I mean, talk to the people that know this area and they've been through it. Also, there has to be greater communication between planning, subdivision, engineering, etc. When people go and try to find out what's happening or who to purchase a property, and nobody seems to know what's going on, that's just not good enough. So I really, really feel for the people here, and I want the best for Saanich too, and I know you guys too, and I really believe that you will rework this bylaw. I have no doubt about it. I trust in you. Thank you.
Perfect timing for a break. We're going to take a real 10 minutes, after which speaker number 31, if they exist, should be ready and poised to go. Again, reminder, if you want to sign up, now's your time to do it if you haven't already spoken. So we'll see you in 10 minutes.